I kind of mentioned yesterday when we were talking about the Spirit moving in our lives, how when I became disabled, that kind of shattered my whole image of life and myself. When you're a extreme workaholic and have no time for anything outside of work, and suddenly that all comes to a crashing halt, it kind of completely tears apart your whole image of yourself and what you're supposed to do and your self-worth. And that's kind of exactly what happened to me. I'd like to say that I dealt with it well, with courage and strength, but I didn't. So it took me a long time to kind of rediscover who I was. And that's what led me back to the church, to what had originally been a very important part of my life. But as I got older and got stuck into a job and you're supposed to push forward, that all kind of got lost by the wayside. A huge part of rediscovering that and kind of rebuilding who I was as a person became my search, my time that I spent with a Trappist monastery in Missouri. I was extremely lucky to find them. They, a few years back, decided to develop a lot of outreach to try and get that Benedictine spirituality out to the wider world. You know, that because it tends to be kind of contained within its walls by its nature. They have lay associations that set up groups in different parishes. They have a program that I was a part of called they refer to as Family Brothers, who instead of taking on that whole vocation and making a full profession, you develop a routine of living inside that the monastery, working and living as a brother, and then trying to find a way to adapt that to the rest of your life and take that back out into the world with you. And I spent about a year and a half doing that. About a year and a half. I'd spend a month living in the monastery, and then the rest of the month I would spend back at my home and with my family and just doing my everyday stuff. So what I kind of wanted to share with you guys are some of the things that I discovered and learned from the brothers that have been there, some of them for 50 years or more. Some of the things that kind of helped me put a different perspective on my life and made me look at my relationships and my goals and everything in a different way. One of the first things I learned was, as humans, we're all broken and limited, and that's okay. Religious life is a school of God's service, and in that school, we help each other to go on that journey of conversion and becoming a stronger, better version of ourselves. I was never given permission in life to be broken or to be limited. I'd always been kind of taught that that was weak and that was wrong and that was something you were to fix immediately. But through the Benedictine philosophies, I kind of learned that it's not you don't want to stay there, but you want to recognize that that's a part of it and try and work to be better. Another important thing that I learned was that only in stillness and in silence can you find yourself and really face yourself. The monastery was out in the middle of about 5,000 acres of woods in the Ozark Mountains. There was no traffic noise. Nothing even bothered to fly overhead because you weren't in the way to anything. So I'd always kind of liked in life to be alone. I liked my time in silence. But I learned there that I really had no idea what silence really was. When you get out there with not even traffic noise, no cell phone signal, no TVs, no radios, no anything, and then you come back into your daily life, you realize how much just little stuff that we just completely take for granted is actually all around us, that we don't even realize is distracting us and moving us on to the next thing. the first time I actually spent a week down at the monastery, when I got back out to the highway and finally could pick up a cell phone signal, and my iPhone started going off with voicemail notification, email notification, and it was just constant beep, 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 buzz, buzz, buzz. I started to panic, and I had to pull over to the side of the road because it was such a shock that I had been so secluded for that whole week, and to suddenly be back inside that with all those alerts going off. And in that silence and in that stillness where there's nothing distracting you, you're really only left with yourself to deal with. You can't avoid the things that you naturally block in your mind. They all bubble to the surface, and you're forced to face them and deal with them. And I learned to let, in the monastery, everything's built around the offices. It's, you've got your 7 points during the day where everybody converges and meets for prayer, and then you've got your mass and that's your work. That prayer is the work, that's the main point. And then everything else that you're assigned, everything else you have to deal with, that becomes the stuff you do in between the important things. I found that in outside life, unless you're Michael's partner, 7's a little much to deal with in a day. But if I learned that if I could try and find that balance, find out how many of those I could manage during the day, that could keep me on track. I had something to pull me back in and focus me back in on what was really important to be done. And then everything else was just the annoying stuff that I had to get done during the day. It kind of completely turns everything on its head, and it sets a different rhythm to your day, and really pulls you back and sets a different tone to the way your day goes. I learned that something may be old, damaged, unattractive, or just unfashionable. But those things have absolutely nothing to do with its value. The Trappists are real big on reusing and repurposing, and if it's old and damaged, fix it back up and keep it going as long as it can, because there's value in that. There's value in that continuation. And also you're not going and wasting new resources and wasting money. Fashionable just means it's expensive. Unattractive doesn't matter if it gets the job done. Damage can be repaired, and if it's beyond repair, it probably has parts that you could use someday if you stored it in a box somewhere. And old things were just manufactured better. But probably the biggest thing that I learned to take back out into actually my life and structure is that my home is my cloister. The monastery is walled off. It's a separate place to where you're controlling what comes in and out. So if my home is where I live, why don't I control it the same way I would want that cloister part of the monastery controlled? If it's something that's a distraction from what's really important in my life, or really important to my spirituality, why am I allowing it in my home? If it's negative, noisy stuff on TV, why am I letting it be there? If it's other people's dramas and dangers that they bring into your life and try and get you to fix, why are you allowing that in there? That's your cloister. That's your space. Control it. Show it the respect that it deserves. The other things that I kind of learned were taken from the vows that a professed brother would make, which in the Cistercian traditions are obedience, stability, conversion, poverty, and chastity. Since I wasn't making that profession, I was working towards making a lifelong commitment to follow all these things voluntarily. I had to find a different way to adapt it into my outside life. Poverty is great if it's the concept that everybody's giving everything into the abbey, so that the source of everything that you need comes from the community. You're giving it up to fund the community, and then the community takes care of everything you need. So it creates a reliance on everything working together and everyone working together. That's not real practical unless you're in the Abbey. So for me, something like poverty was having to figure out a way when you have that loss of money, when that's the whole focus for your life, what does that make you look for? What are the things that you figure out are important? And when someone doesn't have the funds, they have to figure out, what is it I absolutely have to have? What is it that I cannot get through the day without, or my family can't get through the day without? And if you can figure out that mindset, then that's telling you what's important and what you should be working for. Everything else is not necessary. For obedience, in the order, that's being obedient to my abbot and my brothers. I could do that as well, but it seemed to me that there should be something more to that. If I could put my own ego and my own needs to the side and make them less important, that's going to give me the opportunity to see what's needed by others around me. So I make myself obedient to their needs, to just everybody that I meet, and make room in my life for the Spirit to move me to do the work that's needed. For stability is a lifetime commitment to a community. For all of us, that's a much broader picture. That could be our parish, that could be our church, that could be the community here in the town, or whatever it happens to be. And if we're looking to create stability in something like that, to me that's not taking those connections, friendships. A lot of things that we just kind of take for granted are going to be there. If you're going to focus on stability, you need to focus on what does it take to enhance that connection. Make sure those relationships are going to be there and last for a lifetime and be strong. And conversion, as I see it, is just the never-ending process of exploring and refining and evolving who we are and attempt to become the best versions of ourselves. And it's always going to be evolving. It's never going to end, because we are never going to get to a perfection. We're never going to get to that best version of ourselves, but we always have to strive and try. And as far as chastity, I think we all know a better measuring stick for living a morally pure and righteous and pious life than our sexuality or who we're sleeping with or whatever. Our sex life, that isn't a really useful measuring stick. So why would you start your definition there? So, I mean, there's so many other things that we can measure ourselves by. How good we are, who we help. Any number of things. We've been taught them all our lives. So chastity to me is a fine thing to commit to, but just a broader and better definition of